Hey y'all, I'm Ryan.
And I'm Nancy. And this is Sci-Tea, where we bring you engaging conversations between researchers and practitioners.
We feature leading experts as well as early career researchers in psychology and beyond, who will be speaking with other professionals working in settings such as hospitals, schools, and governmental agencies.
So grab your tea
or drink of choice
and enjoy the conversation. I'd like to start us off today by introducing one of our guests, Dr. Ann Gillard. Ann is the Director of Research and Evaluation at the SeriousFun Children's Network. This network hosts camps and community and hospital programs for children with serious illnesses and along with their families. And they do great things in spite of all the challenges that are presented, many challenges, and we'll address some of those today with these programs. And mostly the simplest way I can think of this is just letting kids be kids, because that's really what they want to be able to be. And I've been really lucky enough to have met Ann several times before today as I visited the Hole in the Wall Gang camp in Connecticut. That's the first SeriousFun camp. And Ann has actually helped me a lot, has been really very crucial in helping me form some research that's been inspired by camp. So thank you for that. And I'm going to pass it over to Ryan, and she can introduce our other guest.
Yeah, and we're so excited to have Sterling LeHigh here today as well, who's the executive camp director at RoundUp River Camp in Colorado. And similarly, RoundUp River Ranch, is part of the SeriousFun Children's Network of camps for seriously ill children. And Sterling has a degree in educational psychology and has been a camp professional for over 15 years. So she began her professional career as a founder and director of Camp Life, which is a camp for children with disabilities, and she's an avid volunteer with the American Camp Association. And so we're really excited to have Sterling here for so many reasons, but especially around the incredible work she's doing at RoundUp River Ranch. And I'm just going to be so curious. We're going to talk about the research here, but I'm going to also be so curious to hear what your last year has been like and any pivots that y'all have had sort of with this pandemic circumstances, and how I'm sure y'all have had to do some incredible pivots. So I'll let Nancy go into the study really quickly, and then we can go back to all of the questions that we have about y'all's work.
Right, thank you, Ryan. So we are very much interested in research, but we're also interested, obviously, in connecting that to real life implications and how the research lends itself to the work that actually both of you do. So first off, congratulations, Ann, for this nice new 2021 publication in Children and Youth Services Review. It was great. We both had a chance to read it. And in this study, for anyone who might be joining us, in the study, we found out from former campers from 4 different types of specialty camps what they themselves believed were the lasting outcomes. Not just like what, I just finished camp and how do I feel about it right now, but really over time, what has impacted them by being a camper. And beyond the commonalities across the camps, we learned about some of the specific areas of growth that were attributed to specific camp types. And the camp types included all girl camps, camps that were serving children from low-income families, camps that were faith-based, and then finally medical specialty camps, such as the camp that Sterling directs. So there's lots there. There's a lot of potential implications there. We also hope that each of you will feel free to ask each other questions. I really believe that we can learn so much from each other during this conversation. So with that, maybe we can just start digging in with some questions. Maybe Ryan, you can start us off.
Yeah, I was most struck just at the very outset looking at the study by the different backgrounds of the authors on the paper. And so I was wondering, Ann, if you could tell me a little bit more about how that group of authors got together and how you really execute that scale of a project, looking at all of these different camp outcomes and across different program elements and everything else. So how did y'all get together and really start that project?
Yeah, so the American Camp Association commissioned a study, a 5-year impact study, and worked with the University of Utah, which is where most of the authors are from. And as phase one, there were 3 phases. Phase 1 was an exploratory phase that basically identified, like, here are 18 key outcomes of the camp experience from the perspective of camp alumni. And then phase 2, which is where this study comes in, was looking at, how can we quantify these outcomes? And then phase 3, which is what's currently going on, involves tracking campers over 3 years to look at some outcomes. And as part of phase 2, they wanted to oversample some specialty camps. And so that's where the Girl Scout, the faith-based, the medical specialty, and the camps for kids from low-resourced areas come from. And the reason why they wanted to oversample them was because they felt that these 4 types of camps probably shared some similar goals and characteristics. And we kind of wanted to see, like, well, maybe there's some differences in outcomes based on the type of camp that people go to. So what oversample means is that it's above and beyond the national sample, which they also had. So they had a national sample, and then they also had a panel sample, which was recruited through Qualtrics. And so there were 2 samples to sort of compare our individual camp types with. So it's a little confusing, but but when ACA and the University of Utah asked SeriousFun if we'd like to participate as one of the medical specialty camp groups, we jumped at it, of course, because we thought, gosh, yeah, we think that great things happen to any kids who go to camp, but we think that maybe there might be some different things that happen for kids who go to our medical specialty camps. And so we were really, really interested in finding out more about that.
One thing that really jumped out at me too, just looking at sort of the specification of y'all's camp, is I noticed that kids were reporting feeling more belonging in general after that camp experience. And so I was wondering if either of you or both of you can speak to sort of how much you actually see developmental changes within while kids are at camp, and maybe also the different time frames that you see, and if you've noticed differences based on the length of time of camp, perhaps like sleepaway versus day camp. But I think that piece of the belonging element seemed so important to me for this group especially. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on those.
Yeah, so I'm happy to speak to that. I think, growth at camp looks different for every child, which is something incredible to celebrate. And knowing that each child is unique, as long as they're achieving goals and working in areas that support them growing up to be more resilient and confident, what a win. But there are a few outcomes that really stick out to me as vital, and the sense of belonging is one of them. In 2019, over 50% of our campers' families reported some kind of mental health diagnosis with an emphasis on anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And that's a significant number, over 50%. So while there's obviously a lot of depth to the reasons that we see this growing mental health crisis, I anecdotally hear a lot of children on site talk about feeling alone as a catalyst. It's so difficult to be the only child in a wheelchair, or the only girl with no hair, or the only child wearing oxygen. And campers find great comfort in realizing that they're not alone as they interact with others on a similar life journey. I think that the sense of belonging not only heals the heart and soul, but it also results in increased compliance to medications and diets and treatment plans. And it's amazing how that feeling of belonging can build confidence and self-esteem, which then leads to so many other things, such as the ability to work as a team, communication skills, reaching out to others for friendship. And so all of those outcomes then kind of turn into those developmental changes in kids, which is that we get to see from year to year and camp to camp.
That's so helpful to hear some of the details and how that connects to other important outcomes for kids. One of the things that Ryan and I were talking about before we all met was that looking at the research, across all the camps, one of the elements that were important were people. And it's like, well, what is it about people? And I've seen at least at the Hole in the Wall Gang camp, but people, and I know Sterling, the people you work with are also amazing and lifting people up. But there's also this other special element that among a lot of the staff and camp counselors, they've also been through their own illnesses. And we wonder, is that part of helping with the belongingness? Does it help in some other ways? And how does that play out, do you think, for the kids in their experiences?
That is such an interesting question. And the number one question that I get asked during summer staff interviews is something along the lines of, who is your ideal staff member, or what are you looking for in a staff member? And my answer is always the same. I don't want any staff to be the same. When campers come to camp, I want them to look around and see people who look just like them and have the exact same interests and have gone through the same things. But I also want them to look around and see people who are completely different from them and have very different interests and haven't gone through the same things. This is how we teach kids about diversity, about empathy, about compassion. So yes, I absolutely think it's important for staff who work at camp to have had similar life experiences to our campers. But I also think it's important for staff who have not had the same experiences. Instead, I think it's really important to focus on staff who are teachers and staff who have deep empathy, staff who see good in all people and can celebrate differences. And I think that's where kids learn how to talk about the things they're going through to someone who understands, who can then empathize with them, but also someone who doesn't understand, so they can learn the skills to be able to tell their story and advocate for themselves.
Yeah, and to add on to that too, this study also showed that empathy and compassion and appreciation of differences was something that particularly stood out for campers in medical specialty camps. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised by that. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was surprised by that finding. That those are three of the things that sort of makes medical specialty camps unique compared to other camps. And so I think that really speaks to what Sterling's mentioning, is that they're, being able to look around and see people like you, but also people, with a different life experience, was seen by the participants in this study as something very valuable that they held on to, more than kids in other camps, that was a particular outcome for these folks. And and so much of our research in other places and evaluations point to the experience of being in a place where they don't feel judged and accepted for who they are. Those are really critical pieces to the camp experience. SeriousFun is actually doing a study right now to try to point to, what are those critical key elements like that? Like, how important is it to see people who look like you or who are going through similar things? We don't know across the board how important it is. We know it's important, but we're not sure relative to some other things that are going on at camp. So we're in the middle of another research project to try to figure that out right now.
Wow, we really think that's a great thing to look at. And I think it's interesting because, taking what both of you are saying, it certainly suggests that it can be important, and it can be important in whatever number of ways it is, but there's also this other element of just having other people can be there. And let's say before they even show you that they're supported, but there are other people that you can draw from, and that ideally, if you can see that other people are sort of safe and could be those supportive people building up the kids, that your campers can learn that they don't have to just rely on other kids just like them. I mean, it seems like they aren't necessarily looking at kids having to be just exactly like them, because your camps, both of your, the camps that you're representing, aren't strictly single disease camps, and not every session is just necessarily always about the same disorder. So actually, maybe before we go a little further, maybe we can back up a little bit, and perhaps Sterling, you can tell us just a little bit more just generally about RoundUp River Ranch Camp, And, who are the campers, and what are some of the things that you think make it so special?
Sure. So RoundUp River Ranch enriches the lives of children who have serious illnesses in their families. All of our programs are free, medically supported programs that really provide the opportunity to discover joy, friendships, and confidence. We offer campers and their families the chance to enjoy the joys of childhood, and they're not defined by their illness. I think that's one of the things that makes us really special. And instead, kids can take a vacation from being a patient and just get back to the fun of being a child. And so here, the healing power of laughter and friendships and shared experiences offer kids the chance to make new friends, find the courage to try activities maybe they never thought were possible, and build confidence. We believe in playing with a purpose, and you'll see this in our intentional programming model, which we utilize through all of our activities and programs. So we offer traditional summer camp experiences, weekend-long family camps, and camper reunions. And then over the past year, we've begun offering year-round opportunities that include camp online programs, such as an online summer camp, family camp, kids-only weekend camps, day camps, camper reunions, and camp clubs. We also have offline programs that we offer, such as our Out of the Box program, Joy Delivered, and an e-newsletter called The Best Day Ever. So our campers range from 7 to 17, plus their families. We serve an 11-state region, and we serve a really wide variety of diagnosis groups, including liver disease, liver transplants, GI disorders, celiac disease, EOE, neurologic disorders, craniofacial disorders, dermatologic disorders, kidney disease, kidney transplants, asthma, lung disease, cancer, sickle cell, HIV, heart disease, heart transplants, and the list goes on. So like you said, we do have some sessions that are illness specific. And so, we try to cohort those diagnoses together so kids can truly meet another child who's on a similar life journey. But we also have programs where we're mixing diagnoses together because sometimes the similar life journey is things are hard and different for me. And that's the story, and kids can relate to that. And I will never forget, one camper told me he learned at camp that all kids are going through their own stuff. And, and like, yes, we all are, right? And there was power and healing and discovering that at camp. And that's the goal. That's what we want to accomplish.
That's brilliant.
I'm so curious about what the online camps sort of look like. Just thinking about like the program elements and things like that. So with this time, like that you've pivoted and expanded in all of these ways, what components have you like been able to keep similar, and have you had to improvise with new projects and programs within this online camp? So, sort of how have you set it up? How in the world have you done this?
Yeah, that's so do we have a few hours? No, I'm just kidding. It's been an incredible ride. So last March, I'm really proud of our team. Like, we knew really quickly that things were going to have to look different, and so immediately started researching and brainstorming ideas. And one of the things that was important to our team early on was creating normalcy for kids. We're not canceling on kids. Like, so much in life has been canceled right now, and we're not canceling. And so we focused a lot, and that became the C word. We never used it. And instead we talked about, pivoting. We talked about providing new opportunities. So we immediately started researching online platforms. We knew we wanted it to be interactive. We did not want it to be passive. There's a lot of great videos that are out on YouTube and social media, and they're fun and they're great, and there's a lot of value. Kids have learned a lot from them. But for us, and this kind of goes back to Ann's research, it was about people, and it was about connections. And we didn't want to lose that. So our assistant camp director, Kendra Perkins, did an amazing job of finding a platform called Jigsaw Interactive. And it was originally created for online schools, but it has all these incredible in-depth components for kids to be able to play and to interact with one another. There's an art component. They can move around to different rooms, lots of different controls, with their cameras and microphones. And so we, our initial plan was to mimic our original schedule. So all of the schedule looked the same. We held the same camps, the same sessions. They were the same length. If we originally promised we were doing boating, we found a way to do some sort of boating activity online. So we've done everything from teach origami to have kazoo concerts and everything in between. And kids loved it. Families were nervous. Online school wasn't going very well at that point because no one had a plan, right? So it was like, let's just pivot and hope it works. The families trusted us and tried it, and they've found that it's incredibly active and engaging. We have worked hard to ensure that there's a lot of movement within what we're doing, and again, a lot of focuses on connection. So from there, we've grown. We are now doing camp clubs every single week, which is one of our most popular activities, where kids can literally log on just for an hour once a week. But it's a big party every single time because they get to see their friends who they haven't seen in a week. They catch up, they tell each other about school. And then we've added day camps and adult-only programs for parents to connect and much, much more. So we're excited about it and plan on keeping it. This is kind of becoming our outreach. So obviously we're excited to bring kids back to the campsite when the time is right. But even after we do, our plan is to continue these programs.
Well, I've got the warm fuzzies. Thank you.
It's an incredible gift for that time. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, what an incredible gift for just the connection piece in this last year. I mean, I know like we're all feeling it, and I can't imagine what it's like for kids when that is like the formative time to develop those relationships and like figure out how to navigate them and everything else. So just kudos to y'all for really trying to combat a lot of like the worst pieces of this pandemic time besides like actual disease, right? And I think we're all trying to figure out like how to combat our own loneliness or own isolation and things like that. And it sounds like what y'all are doing for those campers is really I can't imagine it not being hugely impactful for their lives in this time, especially. So just kudos to y'all for that work.
Well, I'm definitely excited to learn even more about, the programmatic piece of research that Ann touches on throughout the study, because there was this pivotal moment where we had 2 clubs that we were offering the next month, and campers had signed up for what they were interested in. And then on the last day of the prior month's clubs, they all started comparing what they signed up for, and they all started switching clubs because they didn't care what the activity was. They cared where their friends were going to be, and they wanted to connect with them. And so figuring out how to kind of balance those things is fascinating, and I think shows what kids really need right now today in this time, which is connection and people and good conversation.
Yeah, and we started this little bit talking about belonging and how that showed up in Ann's study, right? And we see how significant that is, and it's significant especially right now in the pandemic. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Ann, but I'm wondering if there are other aspects of the study that can also be illuminating about camp, but camp right now. Are there, other things, other maybe lessons that are especially applicable now? I mean, this is putting you on the spot a little bit, but maybe there's more. I know there's more there. There's a lot in the study, but other ways to think about how it could be helpful right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and Sterling, like, please contradict or back me up on this, that we people who are not necessarily living with a serious illness in our families or our children, we can learn so much from our camper population. Like, they have so much to teach us because they've been doing this isolation, this lack of connection, I have to work really hard to connect with my friends and to find community. Like, I have to work extra hard. Like, we can learn so much from their life experiences. And like for a lot of folks, I remember some of the families that I had heard from, like, back last April in the beginning of the pandemic was, they're like, this is just like every other, like this is no different. Like, we're not allowed to go outside anyway. Like, we're really restricted in where we can go. Like, this isn't anything different. Like, everyone else around us is freaking out, but this is like what we do. I don't know, Sterling, if you had anything else that you've experienced.
You said it very well. And I mean, through these conversations with kids during camp online, you know, they'll say things like, what's the big deal about sanitizing things? And, you know, well, now everybody knows what it's like to wear a mask, and it's interesting. It is, I think, normalized some things for some of our campers, and yeah, they have a lot to teach us.
That's awesome. I think that's really interesting too around, I was curious, I was thinking about asking this question, but now I'm just going to, because y'all have both kind of touched on it. Just, are there any perceptions from the kids that y'all have heard around sort of the language around needing to wear masks, needing to sanitize those things? I mean, I can just imagine it maybe being like well, I'm 10 years old and I can do this. Like, why are we convincing people kind of thing? And I'm just curious if, or is it the other way around? Like, just as you have into like their perception of what's happening with pandemic restrictions that maybe they've been living with similarly for a long time.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, kids are all over the place, just like adults are, but you know, I've definitely felt some campers' anger and frustration and not understanding, you know, why, you know, things like mask mandates aren't more widely accepted, or, you know, why it's difficult for some to follow. And I think, you know, in many ways, like Ann said, there are things about this that they've been living with already. And now there's this education and this opportunity. And I think there's some frustration that some of that hasn't been more embraced. And, you know, it's heartbreaking to sometimes hear kids online say things like, you know, I just wish everybody at school would wear masks so I could go back because I'm lonely. So yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, and I think Sterling, I don't know if RoundUp River Ranch has done this, but for some of the other camps that have done needs assessments to find out, you know, what's your comfort in coming back to, say, camp programming in person or virtual or off-site, or, you know, just what are people feeling? They're like, well, if camp is doing it, then I'm there. Like, I know it's going to be safe. And there's been this really intense, it kind of overwhelming and an unexpected sense of trust that has really popped out of the camp community, of the families. They're like, yeah, you know, the rest of the world is like having trouble with masks and hands, but we know that won't happen at camp. Like, we know that that's going to be a safe place for us right now, and we are desperate to get there because we trust you, and we know that you're going to take all the precautions very seriously. And I'm is that what you found, Sterling, as well with your folks?
Yeah, I mean, it's humbling, and you know, and you know, our decision to not go back this summer, you know, families have also said, and thank you for making the hard decision, because, you know, we know that camp is a safe place, and we know there's always, you know, for us, we're pretty remote, so we're 3 hours away. So, you know, driving and bathroom stops and all of that, you know, there's a lot of components, and but a lot of our families have said, when we're ready to leave our house, like, you're the safe place, and it's very humbling.
I'm just gonna make a little research connection in that this is so profound what you're saying, and I'm not surprised. I might not have thought of it, but I'm not surprised knowing camp the way I do, which is a little compared to you guys, but it just goes to show that no matter how careful a researcher there is and how broad one's scope might be, it's really hard to capture certain things. Like, how do you capture this? A thing about camp, is that feeling of trust. you know, and it's not just the kids, but it's the family trust. And like, I guess you can go and you can literally ask it, but even when you don't ask it, that trust is influencing some of these other experiences. And it's you know, challenging as a researcher, but I think it's really illuminating hearing about how important that is for children and families in the medical specialty camps in particular, but probably some of the other camps as well. And
I can go back really quick a little bit.
Yeah.
If I can go back really quick a little bit, I thought it was so great what you were saying about the different types of like life experiences that you want the counselors to have as well. And I, especially around, this is different. I was reading this memoir around bipolar disorder, and one of the like formative experiences that this woman writes about is when in one of her psychiatry classes, because she ended up being a UCLA psychiatrist, the framing of, she was having a manic episode, and the framing of what she was doing was, the professor framed it in terms of creativity versus something pathological. So she basically said that in that moment, like the framing of something positive versus pathological made such a big difference from someone who, again, like didn't really know her, probably knew something was like slightly off, right? And again, I know we're talking more about physical disabilities and things like that, but it makes me just think about how impactful a person in any position of power can be with that level of empathy, and just even if you don't know exactly what's going on in the person's life in that moment when they're acting a little strange, like the casting that like positive versus pathological light on it can be so impactful for how they like move through the rest of the world. And I think especially with the ages that y'all are serving, like we know how important those early life experiences are for just how we like move throughout the world. And so I think just again, kudos to y'all for that intentionality around the different experiences for the camp counselors as well, because I was just reflecting on how confidence building it must be to be able to go to someone who has had a similar life experience as you, right? But also to be able to go to someone who hasn't had a similar life experience as you in this way, and still get the like nerves of, are they going to understand all of these things, and then get to have the feedback of, I'm still like this valid person, and my like whatever I'm saying is valid and understood by someone, even if they don't have the exact same experience. So I just wanted to highlight that again, because it seems like that repeated process in like a camp or in any kind of environment could really be a huge difference for any individual kid. Like if they're trying something new that they've never tried before and are nervous, right? Just that, like, it kind of, it's hard to wrap my mind around how much of an impact y'all's camp and with that timing can have. It's just really cool to hear. And again, no question other than just sort of, how do you do it, I guess? And okay, I'll follow up with an actual question. And I'm just wondering, sort of managing kids' other identities beyond sort of disease or anything else. And I'm wondering how sort of conflict management stuff happens at camp, and if there is much conflict, and if you see sort of development in how people handle conflict throughout a week at camp. And maybe this is more of the like in-person camp experience, right? But I was just thinking about how camp could be helping people so much. And to me, part of it is like resolving conflict with people who are different than you. So if either of you can speak to that experience sort of conflict resolution or developmental changes in that time, I'd be really grateful.
I can talk a little bit. I think, I mean, it's a lot. There is conflict. I mean, anytime you anyone who's ever had a roommate or has ever lived with anyone, whether it's, a sibling or whoever, like there's conflict in those situations.
Yeah.
And I think that, it comes down to a lot of things about communication and relationship skills. A lot of our campers at medical, specific camps, they know how to interact really well with adults. Because of the amount of time that they interact with adults in hospitals and clinics and therapies. And kids with illnesses grow up really fast. I mean, there's things that they're dealing with that many of us as adults have never dealt with. But sometimes with all of that, kids will lack the skills that they need to play alongside their peers and to interact with other kids their age. And so camp is a great place to further develop these relationship skills, which can really be cultivated in a lot of the themes that are explored in Ann's research, from teamwork and empathy, compassion, appreciation of differences, friendship building skills. And so there's a lot of intentional work done on that, and we do a lot of training with our staff and volunteers to talk about how to work through a problem step by step, and ensuring that everybody feels heard and you're creating this safe community. And I know this was one of the things that you were wondering was were there surprises? And in Ann's study, and I will say I was shocked to see how low the scores were in the areas of independence and how to live with peers, specifically with medical camps, because we have heard so many anecdotes about kids learning how to become independent, around things like their medical care. But also for many of our campers, this is their first time away from home. And so we spend a ton of time on group living skills. We write a cabin contract at the beginning of the week where the kids, kind of set these are the rules, and sometimes there are things that you and I would all think of, like, we're not going to hit, well, no violence, depending on the age and gender of the cabins. I feel like those guidelines change, but sometimes there are things that are clearly things that kids are nervous about as they come in, and you can see kids thinking about what those potential conflicts could be that they might come into when they're saying what's important to them. And so we spend a lot of time with our staff talking about those things, and our staff spend a lot of time processing what feelings and conflict resolution looks like at camp.
So I wonder, Ann, if you could sort of respond a little bit to that, because when I look at some of the figures in the article, which footnote or sidebar I love, because it's so visually comprehensible, like, wow, you see it like that. But then going into this point that Sterling was bringing up, I think I see what might be going on, but I don't know if you want to address what you think might be going on with why that didn't pop up. That bubble, right, was basically not there, where other items had bigger bubbles, and we were looking at this maybe even more recently than you were. Any thoughts?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I can try to address it a little bit. It's about why didn't independence in particular, because that's been an outcome that I've looked at in other camp evaluations, and it also doesn't tend to show up. And so I think I think it's an issue of what does independence mean in the context of a child with an illness. And I think that term is just doesn't actually fit what the people who wrote the survey are asking. And usually the term independence in like popular culture has a pretty, Western, like sometimes masculine approach to it. Like there's there's the idea of like the hero on top of a mountain as being the epitome of what independence means. And like, that's just not what's going on for our campers. As Sterling pointed out, being away from home for 7 days when you have been watched for years and years of your entire 100% of your life, and then suddenly you're not being watched. I mean, you are being watched by our counselors and medical team. I don't want to say that, but not by the usual people who are watching you, your doctors or your parents. Like, that's a really different thing. And I don't think that is. I think we need to look more into what is that experience, because it's not independence in the way we usually define it. So I don't know. We need more research. So which is the perfect researcher thing to say. But
yeah. So it's not slightly a measurement issue, but it's not because they're talking about other things more, right? It's because you've looked at this in different. You're saying oh, in other studies, you've looked at this in different ways. So there's something about it that it's hard to get into.
Yeah.
So just that they're talking about other things being more important. Interesting. Okay.
I wonder if parents would be more likely to say my child gained independence at camp versus a kid saying I gained independence at camp. And I think about, we do a lot of asthma education, and so we have hard statistics that say kids are more independent in properly taking their controller meds when they leave camp, right? And so we have these kind of things which are all independence, and that can be life-saving independence skills for some of our kids. But I don't know how much kids would say about themselves versus a parent or a caregiver or a doctor or a nurse who works with them regularly.
Responses to open-ended questions, like what other changes, and I try not to ask about independence. One year I did, and then but most of the time, for like 7 years, I didn't. And most of the time, the answers to what other changes did you observe in your child, like the dominant theme in that has been what I call independence. Oh, my child, like she did the dishes without me asking her. And he cleaned, like he made his bed before he like left his room in the morning. Like, oh, he offered to make dinner. That's never happened before. Like there's these little things that pop out as independence. Like, so I think Sterling's right. If we ask other people, they're going to identify things that we traditionally know as independence, but kids are experiencing something else.
That is fascinating.
This context also raised another question for me around, I'm just curious around when kids first come to camp, sort of how their reactions are, especially just given that context of like, if your life has been more closely controlled and things like that. I'm just wondering, I'm sure the answer is going to be like lots of variation, but if there are any sort of like anecdotes around, I'm just thinking if some people have more separation anxiety coming to camp, or if there's like co-occurring mental health stuff with anxiety or anything like that might contribute to more difficult adjustment at the beginning for some kids. If either of you can speak to that.
I mean, it definitely varies by kid. You hit that nail on the head for sure. And it can manifest very differently. When you see, a 16-year-old boy who has never spent a night away from his family, that fear and anxiety can manifest very differently than maybe a 7-year-old girl who it's her first time. Because they're just in very developmentally different places. But I will say anecdotally, I can tell you that it's not unusual for there to be tears when parents leave. And the moment their parents are gone, the tears magically stop. It's something about that initial transition. And I think camps also do an incredible job of that intentional programming. We are so busy at the beginning. I mean, we're busy the whole time, but at the beginning, we are engaging kids constantly to help them start to feel comfortable. And starting with, all of those primal needs. Where's the bathroom? What am I eating? Where am I eating? Where am I sleeping? Where is my stuff going? And once those things are kind of sorted out, and for us, we try to do that within, the first hour that they're there. Once you can meet those basic needs, it's pretty, easy is the wrong word, but it's a smooth transition to getting them into kind of that social component and the fun that then leads to everything else.
That's great to hear. I mean, Sterling, I know that there's a lot that you have faced as a director, and especially during this pandemic. Yet I would think that there's still questions that you might have, like what, if you could, create a study or get some help of having a study done on your behalf. Is there any particular direction or path or ideas that you would like to have brought up in a study?
With unlimited funding.
I'm going to take notes.
Unlimited funding.
All the
and grab a piece
funding in the world.
I'm ready. Bring it.
There's so much to learn. Something that really came to me actually just last night as I was kind of skimming back through Ann's work. Something that I often say to staff and volunteers during training is that activities are simply the vehicle to the outcomes of camp. And it's wonderful if a camper learns how, proper paddling techniques or climbs to the top of a challenge course or catches a fish. But our real focus is teaching, teamwork in a canoe and grit and gold setting at the challenge course and patience of fishing. And, this year has been a particular test for us. I had this aha moment back in March where I thought, I have told, I don't even know how many people we can run camp in a parking lot with a ball of string, right? And I'm like, we are officially put to the test. Like, that is no longer just a phrase. Yeah. And, as I read about the importance of program and different types of camps, I would love to learn more about the value of different types of programs and the effectiveness of different programs. Because that's not something that I have focused on in the past, and said it's about kind of those outputs or those byproducts that come from the programs. I also would love to know more about how long these positive lessons stick with campers, and what those boosters need to look like during the year to kind of keep that positive impact as high as possible. We know the impact declines over time, but what does that really look like? For us, we've created all of these year-round programs that interact with campers throughout the year, and I would love to really explore the effectiveness of what that needs to look like. So as we're talking with families, we can create something that really maximizes that opportunity. I mean, it's so encouraging to read about all these incredible impacts, and then it's so discouraging to think about them waning after time. And I know that there's those core things that stick with kids, and this study really obviously dives into that. But how can we make that even higher and last even longer? And what does that timing look like? Does it need to be every week? Can it be once a month? Is there a difference between the two? Does it depend on the kid or the age? So those are things that are on my mind as we've transitioned into really being a year-round facility.
That's significant. I mean, I think that's related a little bit what I suspect would be maybe that phase 3 study that you were talking about earlier, Ann. Mm-hmm. Because if it's a tracking study, so maybe is the group looking to investigate a little bit more about long-term or even more lasting effects?
Yeah, and this is so funny. So Jim Sibthorpe, who is at University of Utah, is but just sort of known as being an extremely skilled quantitative statistics researcher. And so he was really good with numbers, and he uses really advanced statistical methods to find things out. And I had some questions for him, and we were talking, and he said, and I was looking at this idea of like, how do we track this over time? Like, how could we possibly get how could we get questions that are good enough that could withstand that amount of time and like actually show change? And like Dr. Massive Statistics dude is like, no, he's like, I'm actually going to do qualitative. So I think part of phase 3 is interviews with people over time, which is certainly much more intensive in terms of time and resources. But he pointed out, and I felt a lot better when I was like, I just can't figure out, like, how do I ask the right questions on a survey? I just can't figure this out. And he's like, I don't know if there's a way, because there's some stuff that we cannot detect through a survey. But we can find out things through other methods. And so I want to kind of get away from the primacy of surveys and self-reports as the only ways that we get information here. And so I think when we're, looking at some of Sterling's ideas, which are totally on my research agenda as well. So thank you for validating that. But looking at, how, when does camp start to fade away? Well, we might not get that in numbers, but we might get that in words or pictures or some other venue that we can look at to see, how important is camp, 2 months out, 6 months out, 2 years out in people's lives. And I don't think there's going to be a survey that can give you a number answer to that. So we just got to look at some different ways to look at that. And I'm excited for to explore that. I think it's easier for a lot of camp folks to put into practice what we find from those types of studies, rather than a single number that we're like, well, that's a good direction, but we don't know what to do with this information. So I think just having a richer understanding can help us answer some of those questions that like Sterling brought up.
That's great. I mean, I think that makes so much sense that would be the next sense now that you explain it that way, and to try to capture some of the things that Sterling was talking about. I also was wondering if some of these things that happen where in different studies where it seems that some of the impacts are not long lasting. I'm going to bring this up. I have no idea. There's not I can't think of a way to study it, but I'm just, and maybe I'm grasping, but it seems that it may be that there are a lot of these really good outcomes that kids get from camp. So here's the outcomes, right? And these outcomes impact other things in their lives, and they have these new gifts. And those original outcomes kind of fade, but they still have this new layer that they might not have had quite so well if they didn't have these earlier stuff. So it's in my imagination. I don't know if that's true. I don't even know if that's testable, but I just feel like the benefits of the camp, being in these camps, is lasting.
Going off of both of y'all's ideas there, I have my own if there's unlimited funding idea, and it's just going the opposite direction of the long lasting outcomes. I guess I would be really curious, almost like a daily diaries kind of study, just of how daytime mood and team and all of these things affect the evening sleep, and then the next day confidence and things like that, and just those the day-to-day changes within the camp experience, in that week almost. That to me would be so cool to see. Sort of, I mean, I've seen it more on people in work life spillover kind of things of how does your work influence your home life and things, but I could see it being a really cool question for this context of how do these program elements, did you experience more connection, more belonging feeling this day, and how does that affect how you move into next day kind of? But anyway, that's my giant funding bubble of of questions.
I love it, and I'll tell you that we have a mental health professional on staff in the summers, and I can tell you that there are days within the week in session and evenings that she is not off. We can kind of predict when the breakdowns are going to happen, whether it's missing home or the camp is ending, sadness and everything in between. And so, yeah, no, there are definite patterns that I've never studied, and but anecdotally, I can tell you what nights we make sure those staff are available to support.
Well, and what you were saying earlier about the asthma adherence and outcomes there, I always love having those sort of more super tangible disease outcome things related to, because it's nice when the great psych stuff isn't enough to convince people of the worth of things. So I was just thinking too, are there differences day to day and how well you recognize and take medication when you need to and things like that based on those daily experiences as well. Anyway, I can go down a rabbit hole because all of this work y'all are doing is so interesting, and there are so many questions.
Well, we are mindful of your time. I would like to just, before we wrap up, I do have a question that I'd like to ask Ann before we go, and it's has to do with your position. So as the Director of Research and Evaluation, maybe that's also in there, at the SeriousFun Children's Network. I'm wondering if you can just talk for a minute about the organization's commitment to research. So I think it's so exciting that there is this commitment to research, and maybe you could tell us just a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've been transitioning into this role over the last couple of years. I've worked at the Hole in the Wall Gang Camp, which is the one of the camps in the SeriousFun Children's Network, like Roundup River Ranch is. And there are 16 camps and 14 partner programs throughout the world. And so just in January, I've started close to full time, doing technical assistance and generally some visioning and strategy support for research and evaluation. We're working off of a shared vision statement for research, because our founder, Paul Newman, there's a story that goes around, and I'm not sure how accurate this is, but there's a story going around that says, when people asked him, are you going to allow research at your camp? And he said, no, these kids have been poked and prodded enough. We don't want to put them through any more of that. And I totally agree. And in addition to that, I also, from what I understand of Paul Newman, that he was he wanted everything to be as excellent as it could be, and that he liked feedback and he liked improvement and he liked being innovative. And those were qualities that he thought were really important. So my guess is that by this time, the 2021, he would have been pushing us to figure stuff out in ways that make sure that kids don't feel poked and prodded, but that they're able to share their voice and their experiences with camp. So that's part of the visioning and the strategy that we have. It's really, it's research and evaluation is not meant to, well, I can say this in front of Sterling because she's not a development director, but it's not meant strictly for development purposes. We're not trying to sell our case to funders. We're doing this specifically so that we can increase positive experiences in kids' lives and their families. And so it's that goal of positive experiences for campers and families. Like, that's the thing that really drives research and evaluation. So to do that, so there's the technical assistance that I have, but we have an evaluation academy, which meets monthly and has tutorials about different topics. We also have a shared resource folder where you can sort of teach yourself evaluation techniques called DIY evaluation. Sterling, this will be new to you, but because you're on this call, you get the benefit of this. We have some new funding for camps to engage in evaluation projects and professional development for staff who want to learn more about evaluation in a more structured way. So we just got some funding this year. I think it's $9,000 for a variety of things across the network, in addition to some existing professional development stuff too. So I get to work with all that, and I get to work with cool people like Sterling who ask really good questions and like inspire me to figure out how to answer them in ways that will make sense. So that's a little bit about my role there.
That's fantastic. And I feel, I know that you do have sometimes opportunity to communicate with each other, but I'm so glad that we were able to bring you together today. And I know I've learned a lot. I care so much about the work that you both do, and this is especially enlightening for me. And I love actually also sharing with Ryan, because she's been hearing me talk about camp for a long time. And so I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot of thinking about even defining what camp is and camp goals, and how, and the challenges of research in some ways I hadn't thought about before. So I've gotten a lot from our conversation today, and I just want to thank both of you for being here and sharing all this with us. It's been great. So
and the work y'all continue to do, just adapting to the ever-changing environments and making life a little easier for these kids. It's really inspiring, and like Nancy was saying, I've heard her about it, but it's been such a treat to hear really dive into the specifics of both the study and of Sterling's experience at one of these camps, right? So I'm really just blown away by the work that both of y'all are doing, and grateful that you came to join us for some Sci-Tea.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll be in touch to thank you some more, but thank you again for stopping by. It's been great.